Good day, scholars. Welcome to Lesson 12 of our study of the American Revolution. Our objectives for today. We will hear additional famous words from Patrick Henry. Remember our famous speaker from last time? I am an American. Right? We will also learn about events leading to the first real battle of the American Revolution. You may remember I mentioned at the start of our study that it's split into two parts. Part one of our study is a lot of the events, frustrations leading up to the American Revolution. And then part two is really the study of some of the key battles and key moments of the actual revolution itself. We are nearing that point with events today that lead up to that first real battle. All right, let's get started. We ended our last class with the First Continental Congress writing a Declaration of Rights, stopping all trade with Great Britain, and agreeing to meet again in May of 1775 to see just where things were standing. It was during this time, you'll remember, that the colonists started thinking of themselves as united together for a common purpose, a common cause, a common goal. In those words of Patrick Henry, I am an American. Well, as time went on, 1774 became 1775, and then things moved into 1776, and things were not really looking any better. King George III had not paid any attention to their requests. Parliament had not repealed the Intolerable Acts. Their rights as Englishmen had not been restored, and British soldiers were still stationed in the colonies. More and more colonists were expecting that a fight was indeed nearing. By spring, the militias in many of the colonies were preparing for war. Now, you remember, a militia is like a volunteer citizens' army, right? Townspeople, farmers from the area volunteering to be a part of the army. So, as those militias were preparing for war in March, while the Virginia State Assembly debated about whether Virginia's militia should be one of those preparing for war against the British, Patrick Henry gave another famous speech. While some attendees did not think it was necessary to prepare for war, Patrick Henry had this to say in response. Shall we try argument? Sir, we have been trying that for the last 10 years. We must fight. Gentlemen may cry peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is actually begun. Why stand we here idle? Forbid it, Almighty God. Now, scholars, what he was saying was that we have been talking, requesting, trying for 10 years to make change happen, and nothing we've been doing has worked. That by Parliament and the King not responding or listening, he was saying that means the war has started. Them not listening to us has started this war. We should stop wasting time standing around deciding what to do. And then Patrick Henry, standing tall, arms raised high, his voice clear as a bell, finished with the words that have stirred lovers of liberty ever since, saying, I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Now, Patrick Henry was mistaken when he said the war itself had actually started, but 3 weeks later, it did actually start. A real battle took place. Let me tell you the story of how that fighting did actually get started. The Massachusetts militia spent several months training to fight, as well as collecting guns, gunpowder, and other supplies. This militia, remember, made up of farmers and townspeople of Massachusetts, they called themselves Minutemen because they said they could be ready to fight in a minute's notice. And those Minutemen of Massachusetts hid their supplies and weapons in the village of Concord, which was about 15 miles northwest of Boston. Now, do you remember how those coercive acts, or as we might better remember them, the intolerable acts, took away Massachusetts' right to self government and how a new governor was appointed? Well, that new governor was General Thomas Gage. And somehow, General Gage had learned about those hidden supplies in Concord. He also learned that two sons of liberty, who were the main troublemakers, Sam Adams and John Hancock, were hiding in the village of Lexington. Now, Lexington was on the way to Concord, so General Gage thought he could kill two birds with one stone. Now, scholars, two birds with one stone is an idiom. It does not actually mean killing two birds with one stone. What it means is to accomplish two things at the same time, right? He can do two things in one trip. The two things he could accomplish: he could send his troops first to capture Sam Adams and John Hancock in Lexington, and then those troops could continue on to Concord and seize the hidden supplies and weapons. Aha! In his plan, accomplishing two things in one trip. The British soldiers would leave Boston in the dark of night and take Lexington by surprise. But the Sons of Liberty got wind of General Gage's plan. Two Sons of Liberty, Paul Revere and William Dawes, got ready to ride ahead of the British soldiers and alert citizens along the way that the British soldiers were coming. The problem was there were two routes to Lexington. Which one would the Redcoats, that's the name given to the British soldiers because of their bright red coats, which route would the Redcoats take to get to Lexington? One route was longer, but it was entirely over land, which you're seeing here in light blue. The other route was a shorter one, but it required the soldiers to first take the time to cross the Charles River by rowboat and then begin their overland march. That's the bright green route. Well, Billy Dawes started out along the land only route to get to Lexington, calling out to Patriot homes along the way that the Redcoats were coming. But Paul Revere stayed behind in case the British would take the other route instead, crossing the water and then traveling. Paul Revere arranged for a signal light to be sent from the tower of Old North Church in Boston. A young Son of Liberty in the tower would hang one lantern in the tower if the British soldiers were taking the all land route. But if the troops were taking boats first and crossing the Charles River to take the shorter route, that young Son of Liberty would hang two lanterns in the tower of Old North Church. Now, scholars, that's a famous line from a poem about Paul Revere's ride written by William Wadsworth Longfellow. In that poem, one if by land, two if by sea, is one of the most famous lines. And now you know what it means. One lantern would be lit in the tower of Old North Church as a signal light if the British soldiers were going to take the land route. Two lanterns would be lit if they were going to cross the water, right, the sea, to take the shorter route. One if by land, two if by sea. So, which route would the British soldiers take? Would the Son of Liberty in the tower of Old North Church light one lantern or two that fateful night on the 18th of April in 1775? Hmm. Will Sam Adams and John Hancock be captured in Lexington? Will the British soldiers seize the supplies hidden in Concord? Third graders, you will find out the answers to all of these questions in our next exciting lesson. Thanks for joining me. All right, looking at our objectives for today, we heard additional famous words from Patrick Henry, probably his most famous quote of all. Right? Give me liberty or give me death. And we learned about events leading to the first real battle of the American Revolution. You will next time find out, right, what happens on this road to Lexington and Concord, where the first battles will take place. You will find out if one lantern was hung or two. Our battles of the American Revolution begin in our next lesson. Remember today's assignment. Open that attached Google form, answer the questions about today's lesson, and remember, you may look back at this lesson, listen to information again, look at slides, click that submit button at the bottom of the Google form to submit your answers. Good luck, and I'll be with you again soon.